I froze in the kitchen. In my hand was a crumpled piece of paper I had just pulled out from the pocket of my shirt. The words on it weren't long, but they were enough to drown the whole house in silence. And the last line was the name of the closest friend I've ever had. I don't know how long I stood there like that. My heart was pounding, sweat running down my back, and my hand was shaking so badly I had to fold the note just to keep from dropping it. It all started just minutes ago. This morning was no different from any other. Emily, my wife, had already ironed a white shirt and left it on the chair. I put it on, tied my tie, thinking about the meeting at work. When I slid my hand into the pocket, my fingers brushed against something stiff. A piece of paper, folded. I pulled it out, opened it, without a clue of what I was about to see. I miss you every minute. Friday night. The old hotel. No one will know. Don't let him suspect. Every word felt like a tiny blade. I looked at the handwriting. Too familiar to mistake. The way she wrote you, slightly slanted. The dot at the end, barely a speck. There was no name of who it was for. Just 3 words on the last line. Keep it quiet, Daniel. Daniel. The name made my head buzz. The friend who grew up with me. The man who stood beside me on my wedding day. I folded the letter and put it back in my pocket. I didn't tear it. I didn't call Emily. I just sat down, held my head in my hands, listening to the clock on the wall ticking, as if counting down. Turns out, my whole world could collapse because of one thin sheet of paper. People say betrayal cuts like a knife. But to me, it was silent as this morning. And if only I had let it go right then, maybe things wouldn't have spiraled so far. After that, my name is Michael. I'm 35, a civil engineer. If you ask me what I've been most proud of in my life, I wouldn't talk about work. Not about the house we finally managed to buy after all those years. I'd say one word, Emily. I met Emily when I was 21. That day in the library, she was struggling with a stack of books so high it covered her face. I reached out to help, and the whole pile nearly fell on me. She laughed, a shy, awkward laugh that I can still hear clearly to this day. Back then, I had no idea that such a small moment would open up an entire lifetime. We dated all through college. Those nights in a cramped dorm room, typing away on assignments, sharing 1 cup of instant noodles, splitting a single slice of toast between us. One time, I got a scholarship, $200. For the first time in months, we ordered a pizza. We sat on the floor, eating with our hands, laughing so hard our stomachs hurt. Emily said that night was the most luxurious dinner of my life. After graduation, life wasn't easy. We had nothing. I got a job at a small construction company, worked through the nights, and still came up short. Emily found work as an accountant for a tiny office. Her salary just enough to pay the rent. Some months, we counted every dollar. But every evening, when I walked through the door, I could hear her humming quietly while cooking. Emily had this little habit. On days that mattered to me, she would iron a white shirt and leave it neatly on the chair. Seeing that shirt always gave me strength. Like someone was standing behind me, silently cheering me on. That habit stayed with us for years. And that morning was no different. We got married after 5 years of being together. A small wedding, just close friends. Daniel, my best friend, was my best man. He laughed, hugged me tight, and said, "You're the luckiest guy alive." That day, I believed him. Years later, life slowly got better. We bought a small house in the suburbs. On weekends, Emily and I would make coffee and sit on the porch, reading. One golden afternoon, she rested her head on my shoulder, eyes half closed, and I thought, if life could stay just like this, I'd need nothing else. But maybe, in that very moment of peace, a crack had already started to form. I buried myself in work, stopped saying the sweet things I used to. I thought love didn't need words, that actions were enough. I was wrong. Lately, Emily had been coming home late. She said it was because of year-end audits. One night, I saw her sitting at the table, eyes glued to her phone, smiling to herself. I noticed, and I told myself it was nothing. Just a coworker sending something funny. Looking back now, the signs had been there for a while. Daniel too. He called less, stopped asking to meet. Back then, I just thought everyone was busy with their own life. If only I had paid more attention. Maybe I would have seen the distance growing between us. But I ignored it all. I don't even know when it happened. When we stopped talking like lovers. and became just two people, living under the same roof. Since that morning, it felt like I was living inside a slow-motion film. Everything on the outside stayed the same, but inside my head, a heavy fog wouldn't let go. That night, Emily came home close to 9. I was sitting at the dining table, the yellow kitchen light pulling her shadow long across the floor. She set her bag down, gave a tired smile. "Have you eaten?" "I had to work late." I nodded, kept my voice steady, not a word about the note in my pocket. "We had dinner." The clinking of fork and knife sounded louder than ever. She talked about little things from work. I just watched. My eyes stayed on the phone, lying face down on the table. But my mouth stayed shut. The next day, I began to notice more. Little habits that suddenly stood out. A new password on her phone. The screen always turned over. Quiet calls out on the balcony. Her laugh, light as the wind, wasn't for me anymore. And I thought of Daniel. When did we stop meeting up? Lately, every time I called, he had an excuse. Before, a single text saying come out, and the two of us would drink beer until midnight. Now, my messages get nothing but one short reply. Busy. One afternoon, I tried again. Let's grab a drink. Read. Scene. No answer. Strangely, I didn't get angry. Maybe because I wasn't ready to believe. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. Every time my hand brushed against that crumpled note in my pocket, I could feel the edge of it, sharp as a blade. At night, Emily slept soundly. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Some nights, I went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. Standing there, looking at the wooden chair where she always left a shirt for me, I remembered a night, years ago, newly married, walking home from work in the rain, hand in hand, laughing like a couple of kids. That memory now feels so far away. It hurts in my chest. One evening, I drove out near her office. At 6:30, she came out. But instead of heading home, she stood waiting at the corner. A car pulled up. She opened the door and got in. And in the sweep of headlights across the mirror, I caught a glimpse of the driver's shoulder, the line of his face. My body reacted before my mind could process. Heart racing, head buzzing. My hands gripped the wheel so hard they went numb. Even in that split second, I knew Daniel. I didn't follow. I didn't honk. I just sat there, watching the red tail lights disappear around the bend. That moment burned itself into me. It won't leave. That night, I came home first, sat alone in the dark living room. When Emily came back, she said exactly what I expected. Dinner with coworkers. I listened. I didn't question. I just nodded, as if nothing had happened. Silence. That was the only weapon I had left. From that night on, I no longer believed what they said. I only believed what I saw. And in that moment, I knew I would have to find out the truth, in my own way. Since that night, I stopped being a man who believes in words, explanations, kind gestures. They all became noise. I began to see everything with different eyes, slower, sharper, and colder. For the next 3 days, I kept my life the same. Work, dinner, small talk. But inside, I wasn't the same man anymore. I had started to prepare, because if I only listened, all I would ever hear were lines already rehearsed. I needed what they couldn't hide in time. I started with time, a small notebook, pencil marks, one by one. Every night, Emily came home late. Every text, don't wait, have dinner first. 1 week was enough. The dots formed a clear pattern. Tuesdays, Fridays, 2 hours, gone. And on those exact days, Daniel disappeared too. One Tuesday night, I decided to follow. The streets in winter were empty, yellow lights spilling across wet pavement. I kept my distance. Emily's car turned into a small hotel, not fancy, but discreet. She walked in, never looked back. I sat in my car, just watching. A tightness rose in my throat. Rain gathered on the windshield until her figure blurred, and memories came flooding back. Another rainy night, years ago. We walked home, no umbrella, drenched and laughing. Back then, we thought, having each other was enough. Tonight, it was raining again, but the distance between us was wider than the street in front of me. I didn't go in, not that night. I only needed to know. Where? I came back 2 more times, same nights, same place. And both times, the same scene. Emily went in first, and a few minutes later, Daniel. The third time, headlights swept across his face. and there was no room left for doubt. If the first time I only saw them share a car, then now I knew exactly where their paths crossed. After that, I gathered everything I could. A prepaid phone, an anonymous email. I copied the pictures and messages she accidentally left behind. One evening, while she was in the shower, her screen lit up. Friday, same place. I took a picture, put it back exactly as it was, left no trace. The first wave of pain had been like a storm, but when a storm is over, all that's left is bare ground. No more anger, just a cold clarity. And then came another Friday, a light drizzle, raindrops crawling down my windshield. I followed her car, keeping my distance. Same hotel, but this time I didn't stay outside. I switched off my phone, pulled up my collar, and walked in. The air inside was a mix of cheap perfume and damp carpet, yellow lights falling over gray tiles. The elevator doors closed just behind her. I stood still for a moment, listening to the heavy thump of my own heartbeat. The clerk glanced at me. I walked to the desk, placed a $100 bill down. The woman who just came in. What room is she in? My voice was low, rough. Even I didn't recognize it. He looked at me, then at the bill, and nodded. 5th floor, room 506. I took the stairs. Each step felt heavier. The narrow stairwell smelled of old carpet. I slowed my breathing, just to keep the rhythm. 5th floor. A long, cold hallway. Only the hum of an air conditioner. I stopped at 506, my hand on the doorknob. Numb. Frozen, like it didn't belong to me. A deep breath. I closed my eyes, hearing the rush of blood in my ears. I knew, once I opened that door, nothing would ever be the same. And then, from the other side, came the laugh of a man I knew too well, and a woman's voice that made me go completely still. The laugh from inside was so familiar it made my skin crawl. A man's voice, Daniel, and mixed with it, a voice I once knew by heart, now sounding like it came from a stranger. I froze, every word slipping through that thin door, cut like a small, sharp blade. 1 beat, 2 beats. I lifted my hand and knocked. 3 times. Silence. Then chaos. A chair crashing over. Whispered panic. Hurried footsteps. The door cracked open, and I saw everything. Daniel, half naked, clutching a towel around his waist. His eyes locked on mine, frozen. Behind him, Emily. She wrapped herself in a sheet, her face pale, lips trembling. For a moment, the three of us just stood there. Not a word. I drew a long breath. When I spoke, my voice was calm. Sorry, am I interrupting? Emily took one shaky step forward. Michael, I can explain. I raised my hand. No, nothing you say can change what I just saw. Daniel started to speak. Listen, Enough. I looked him straight in the eye. You were the last person I ever thought would do this. Today, you erased everything yourself. I glanced at them one last time. If I stay here another minute, I'll become someone I don't want to be. Enjoy what's left. From this moment on, I'm no longer a part of either of your lives. Then I turned around. No yelling, no smashing things, only the sound of the door closing behind me, heavy, like a final period. The hallway stretched long and cold. Every step echoed into the emptiness. Neon lights flickered, my shadow dragging endlessly across the wall. No tears, only a thick, suffocating silence. Outside, the rain kept falling. Cold water slapped against my face. As I walked out of the hotel, I sat in the car, hands on the wheel, still, for a long time. Then I started the engine. The road home was nothing but darkness. Streetlights smeared across the windshield. The radio was on, but all I could hear was the wiper's rhythm, back and forth, over and over. If before, there was still doubt. Tonight, there was none left. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat alone in the living room. In the dark, what I'd just witnessed kept looping in my head like a burned-out film. I thought I'd lose control, break things, scream, but I didn't. There was nothing left inside, except a cold, heavy stillness. When anger is crushed by a truth so clear, there's nowhere left to run. The next morning, Emily walked in, eyes swollen. She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. Don't. I looked her in the eye. We'll talk, but not today. Then I grabbed my coat and walked out. The door closed behind me, leaving the house empty. In the days that followed, I gathered every piece of proof and handed them all to my lawyer. I slept on the couch. We never shared a bed again. Daniel disappeared. No calls. No messages. A month later, we stood in court. Emily cried. I didn't look at her. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I simply said, "There's nothing left to say." The day I received the divorce papers, I went home, took that white shirt from that morning, and hung it back in the closet. I keep it, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself how even the strongest things can collapse because of a thin piece of paper. I closed the closet. Quiet. That evening, I made a cup of coffee and sat on the porch. It was still raining, but this time, I didn't feel cold. I thought of the years behind me, of the things I lost, and the things that will never come back. And from that night on, I learned one thing. Some truths you have to see with your own eyes, and once you do, you'll never be the same person again. People say divorce is the end, but I've learned court only ends it on paper. In real life, there's no bell that rings to tell you the pain is over. That morning, I walked out of the courtroom. The divorce papers in my pocket felt cold, like a piece of metal. The city was still loud. People went to work, laughing, talking. The whole world carried on, while inside me, there was nothing but an empty hollow. The first day back home, I opened the door. That same damp smell hit me. The living room looked the same, except the wedding photo was gone. Just a blank patch of wall, a white nail sticking out. I stood there, looking at that empty space, feeling like I had just walked into someone else's house. That night, I opened the fridge. A few cans of beer, a box of cold leftovers. This kitchen used to be warm. Now it was just cold. I drank in the dark. The ticking clock became the only heartbeat in the house. The first night, I lay on the sofa, eyes wide open. Wind hissed through the crack of the door. Not a minute of sleep. Weeks passed, and I lived like a shadow. By day, I went to work, signed papers, drew lines on a screen, like a machine. By night, I came home, took a shower, and stared at the ceiling. Friends called, asked me out for a drink. I said no to all of them, not because I was busy. I just couldn't stand the question. You doing okay? I had no idea how to answer. Daniel vanished completely. Changed jobs. Changed his number. Sometimes I wondered, if I met him again, what would I do? But I never stayed long with that thought. One evening, after nearly 2 months, I just kept driving. The highway stretched on forever, rows of yellow lights sliding behind me. It wasn't until the gas needle hit red that I noticed I had stopped by the river, the place where Emily and I used to sit. I turned off the engine, got out. The wind cut across my face. The river smelled raw. I sat on the stone steps, pulled out a cigarette. I'd quit smoking for years, but that night, I needed something to fill the empty hole in my chest. The lighter clicked. Smoke curled into the dark. Some nights, I open the old photo albums, the ones I've been avoiding for months. I look at my younger face, at Emily's bright smile. But this time, there's no anger, just a tiredness so heavy. It presses me down, so tired that sometimes I wonder, why am I still here? Even work started to slip. I messed up a big drawing. The whole team had to redo everything. The boss called me in. What's going on with you? I just said, I'm sorry. I could see it. Patience wearing thin, in everyone's eyes. One Friday night, the office was empty. I stood by the window, watching the stream of cars below. The trails of headlights looked like a golden river, flowing far, far away, and I felt like I'd been left behind, standing alone on the shore. The more I pretended to be fine, the faster I crumbled inside, and then something small pulled me out of that loop. That day, rain poured hard. Driving across the bridge, I saw a man trying to push his stalled car to the side. I pulled over, turned on the hazard lights, got out. 2 strangers, soaked to the bone, pushing a heavy car in the rain. When it was done, he turned to me and said, smiling, "Thanks, man. Thought I'd be stuck here all night." Just a simple smile. But that night, when I got home, I realized, for the first time in months, I had done something that meant something, no matter how small. After that, I started to change a little. In the evenings, instead of sitting in the dark, I walked around the neighborhood. On weekends, I cleaned the house, got rid of the things I no longer needed, kept only what truly mattered. One Sunday morning, While organizing the closet, I picked up that white shirt. I almost shoved it deep inside, but instead, I folded it carefully and hung it in a corner by itself. It's no longer a wound. It's just a reminder. A reminder that if I keep sitting in the past, I'll end up burying myself there. For the first time, I whispered to myself, I have to move on. There was a night, before everything began to change, when I almost collapsed. I sat alone on the sofa, phone in my hand, the screen, a pale glow in the dark. I opened my messages with Emily. All those old conversations were still there. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One more second, and I would have sent it. Do you ever miss us? But in the end, I erased it all. I set the phone down, buried my face in my hands, and for the first time, I said it out loud, even if it was only to myself. I have to stop. The next morning, I walked into the gym. The glass door swung open. That smell of rubber, old music blaring from a speaker. My body was heavy, out of breath after just a few minutes on the treadmill. But with every drop of sweat hitting the floor, a bit of the weight on my chest came off. It had been a long time since I'd done something purely for myself. I went back the next morning, and the next, 20 minutes, then 30, then an hour. My muscles ached, but my head felt lighter. One day, a text came in. Mark, an old coworker, heard you disappeared from the world. Coffee. I stared at the screen for a while, then typed, yeah, a small cafe on the corner. Mark was already there, coffee steaming on the table. He looked at me. You look different. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I guess. At first, I stayed quiet, but for the first time in months, I started talking. Everything. No holding back. Not to get pity. Just to let it out. Mark didn't interrupt. He just listened, and when I was done, he put a hand on my shoulder. I don't know what to say, but you don't have to go through this alone. Just one sentence, but when I walked out of that cafe, I felt something lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I realized talking doesn't make you weak. It sets you free. After that, I started to reconnect. I called my parents, asked about their health. At night, I replied to a few messages from friends, not to complain, just to remind myself that beyond all the pain, I was still tied to life. Spring came. One weekend, I joined a running group in the park. A few men around my age, each of them with their own reasons. We jogged in silence. No questions, just the sound of feet on the path, and heavy breathing. Afterward, they sat down on the grass, drinking water. One of them said, "Come every week. Running clears your head." I nodded. And the next week, I came back, slowly. The new habits began to fill in the empty spaces. Mornings, gym. Weekends, running. Nights, books, music. Small things. But they made me feel alive again, not just existing. One night, after a run, I stood on my porch and looked up. It had been a long time since I'd noticed the stars. No more shouting, no more why, just the wind in the trees, and my own breathing, and I realized, for the first time in months, my chest no longer felt like a dark pit, only a scar, and that was enough. I started cooking again. One evening, I made beef stew with potatoes, a bit of salad on the side. I sat down, ate slowly. The kitchen no longer felt cold, just quiet. While cleaning up, I found that white shirt again. I stopped, held it in my hands. But unlike before, this time it didn't sting. I smiled, folded it neatly, and hung it in its own corner. That was the last time. It pulled me back to the past. From that moment on, it was just a shirt, nothing more. One afternoon, I walked through the park and saw a young couple fighting. The woman stormed off. The man stood still, eyes red. For a second, I wanted to walk over, put a hand on his shoulder, and say, "I know this feeling. You'll get through it." I didn't say it. I just kept walking. But in my head, I thought, maybe one day, my story will be a reminder to someone else. The way a stranger's smile in the rain once reminded me. That summer, I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always dreamed of, but never dared to try. Through the lens, I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way light filters through the trees, the smile of an old man, a child running after a kite. Life is still there, if you choose to look. I know what happened will never be erased, but it has become a scar. And this time, I stepped out of the dark, with one thought in my head: The past doesn't get to control me anymore. A year after the divorce, life had settled into a quiet rhythm. No more sleepless nights. No more hollow days. I worked. I went to the gym. I carried my camera. Life wasn't exactly colorful, but it had its own pace. That fall, my company held a charity photo exhibition, raising funds for children in need. Someone at work knew I'd been learning photography. They asked me to submit a few pictures. I hesitated, but in the end, I said yes. Opening night. The room glowed warm yellow. Frames lined the walls. Soft chatter. Clinking glasses. I stood in a corner, quietly. No one there knew the story behind the lens. I was looking at one of the photos when a voice, so familiar, made every muscle in my body stop. Michael. In that moment, all the noise around me just vanished. I turned around. Daniel was standing right there. A year since I'd last seen him. He looked thinner, gray streaks in his hair, and a face full of unease. I froze, stared straight at him, and one thought cut through my mind. I thought every door to the past was shut. Turns out, one word was all it took to throw them open again. He said softly, "Didn't expect to see you here." I answered calm, "Me neither." We stood there, still as statues, while the room around us kept moving. I asked, "You here? Alone?" Daniel shook his head. "No, Emily's here too." Her name didn't sting anymore. It was just a name, a pause. Then he drew a deep breath. "Michael, I owe you an apology." Under the soft yellow light, I saw it. All the confidence he once carried was gone. All that was left was fatigue. He went on, "After that night, I've asked myself every day why I did it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I lost everything because of that mistake." I stood there, silent, listening. He kept going. "I thought I'd be happy with Emily, but I wasn't." We lasted only a few months. Trust, respect, all of it disappeared. His voice cracked. "Now she and we're nothing." I took a long breath. No anger, no satisfaction, just a truth laid on the table. I said, "It took me a year to stand back up after what happened. What about you?" Daniel forced a faint smile. "I'm still trying." I was about to speak when I heard a voice behind me. "Michael." I turned. Emily was standing there. A long, heavy moment. She looked different. Not the confident woman I once knew. Her eyes seemed tired. From a long, hard road. "Can we step outside? Just for a minute." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. I looked straight into her eyes and nodded. We walked out to the small garden behind the gallery. The late afternoon sun spread across the wooden benches. A light breeze, leaves rustling. So quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I stopped, kept a few steps between us. Emily spoke first. "I'm not here to explain myself. I just wanted to say thank you." I frowned. "Thank you." She nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you for that night. For not making it worse. For walking away in silence. And forcing me to face myself. If you had exploded in anger, I would have found a way to blame you. But because you didn't, I had to see everything for what it was." Her breath trembled. Life after that wasn't easy. And I know now. I lost the only person who ever truly cared for me. I stood still, listening to every word. And in my head, just one question. Was this only an apology? Or was there something more waiting behind it? Emily took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the bench. The garden was wrapped in silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves. She looked up, her voice trembling. "I know. Saying sorry now won't change anything, but I still have to say it." I listened quietly, calmer than I ever thought I could be. A year ago, I would have exploded. Today, I just wanted to hear her through. After the divorce, I tried to start over with Daniel. Emily said, each word heavy, but I couldn't. Not because he didn't care about me, but because from that day on, I finally saw what I had been chasing. The thrill, the attention, it was all an illusion. She paused, tears rolling down her face. I lost the only person who stood by me when life was hard, and I traded it for something I thought was happiness. A long silence. Then she looked straight into my eyes. "I'm not here to ask to come back. I know that's impossible." She shook her head, her eyes blurred. "I just need you to know, for the past year, I've lived every single day with that loss, and I know I'll be paying for it for the rest of my life." I held her gaze for a long moment. A year ago, those words would have been like fuel on a fire. But now, inside me, there was nothing but still water. "Emily," I said slowly, "I don't hate you anymore. But I'm not the same man I was." She nodded. "I understand. And there's one thing I want to ask of you." I waited. "If one day you meet someone else, someone who truly loves you, please don't let what happened close your heart forever." Her words stopped me for a second, not because I wanted to go back, but because it felt like her final request. I sat down across from her, looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time, I wasn't pulled into the past. "Thank you," I said softly. "But there's something I want to say too." She looked up. "That day, when I stood at the door of that hotel room, I thought I'd hate you for the rest of my life. But the truth is, what stayed with me the longest wasn't anger. It was regret. Regret that we let things fall that far apart." A light breeze passed through, carrying the scent of dry leaves. "And now," I said, "both the anger and the regret, I've let them go. You're no longer part of my life. I hope you find your own peace." Emily smiled faintly through her tears. "Thank you for listening." She stood up and walked away, her figure growing smaller, down the garden path covered in yellow leaves. I watched her go. No pain, no relief, just the quiet sense of a door closing. When I went back inside, Daniel was still there. He looked at me, his eyes asking silently, "What did she say?" I simply nodded. A clear, final nod. That was enough. He nodded back. No handshake, no hug. We walked past each other, like two men who had just set a heavy weight down and kept walking. I left the gallery as twilight settled. The autumn wind was cold, but this time I felt light. Some meetings aren't meant to fix things. They're meant to end them. That night, standing by my window, watching the city lights below, I understood finally. It was over, and for me, it no longer felt like a loss. It felt like freedom. After that night at the gallery, I went home, shower, dinner, sleep. Like any other day. No tears, no anger, just a strange kind of quiet. So strange that even I noticed it. In the days that followed, I began to see the difference. In the morning, the apartment felt bigger. On the way to work, the music on the radio seemed sharper, like I could hear every note. Everything around me was the same. But for the first time, the city looked brighter. A door had closed, and this time, I wasn't trapped behind it. But closing a door doesn't erase it all. Sometimes, in dreams, I still see that garden with yellow leaves, still see Emily turning away. When I wake up, there's no pain anymore, just a hollow space. I understood. To find real peace, I needed one last conversation. Not with Emily, not with Daniel, with myself. That Saturday, I drove to my old street. The house that used to be my home had new owners now. The red brick walls, the row of trees along the path, still the same. Only the nameplate by the door had changed. I stood there, quiet, my hand on the cold wooden gate. The rough grain of the wood brought back that last day. Pulling a suitcase, walking away, leaving everything behind. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I came back only to say goodbye." Then I turned and walked away. On the way home, I stopped by the river, the place where I'd spent so many nights. In those early months after the divorce, the same stone steps, the same cold wind, the same raw smell of water. But this time was different. This time, I came not to hide, but to close the chapter. I sat down, opened my backpack, and took out a notebook. For the first time, I wrote, not for anyone else, for me. On the first page, I wrote, "If one day you read this again, remember, tonight is the night I truly let go." And then the words poured out about the pain, the betrayal, the nights when I thought I'd break, and the moments that saved me, the gym, the running, and the smile of a stranger in the rain. I wrote until my fingers ached, like pulling every thorn out of my chest. When I closed the last page, the wind from the river brushed cool across my face, and inside me, there was finally a quiet space. A few weeks later, a call from an unknown number. "Hi, is this Michael?" A young woman's voice, cautious. "Yes, this is Claire, from the community support group. Mark told me about you. We're looking for people willing to share their experience at group sessions. Would you be interested?" "You mean telling my story to others. Not to reopen wounds, she said, but so someone at rock bottom can see that someone else has made it through. You don't need to be a therapist. Just proof. I was silent for a few seconds. In my mind, I saw myself a year ago, lost, alone, and wishing someone had told me, "You'll get through this." "I'll try," I said. The first session was on a Saturday afternoon. A small room, chairs in a circle, 10 men sitting there, each carrying their own pain. One had just lost his wife. One had been betrayed. One had lost his job. When it was my turn, I stood up. No notes, no script. I just told it. The hotel room, the year that followed, the long nights, the runs, and the gallery. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't add anything. I just told it as it was. The room went silent. Eyes glistened, searching for a way out. A young man asked, "How did you stop being angry?" I answered, "I didn't try to forget, and I didn't forgive in one day. I just did one small thing every day, to remind myself that life was still out there." And one day, when I looked back, I realized the anger had fallen away on its own. After that first group session, I walked out into the night. Cold wind slipped under my coat, but inside, there was a strange warmth. For the first time, I realized that the story I once carried like shame could become a bridge to someone else. The next week, I came back for the second session. The same small room, chairs in a circle. But this time, when I sat down, I no longer felt like an outsider. A middle-aged man shared his story. A marriage broken by betrayal. His voice trembled, eyes red, fingers gripping the fabric of his pants, like holding on to something fragile. Around the circle, some lowered their heads. Others tapped a knee softly, to keep steady. When it was my turn, I didn't speak right away. I looked straight at him and asked, "What is it that you fear the most now?" He lifted his head and answered without hesitation, as if the words had been waiting. "I'm afraid I'll never be able to trust anyone again." The room fell silent, because that had once been my fear too. After the session, when almost everyone had left, he stopped me at the door. "How did you learn to trust again?" I paused, thought for a moment, and answered honestly, "I'm not sure I fully have, but I realized if I let that fear decide everything for me, the one who loses again will only be me." He nodded, like he had just found a small piece of hope. That night, when I got home, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. One question echoed, "And what about me?" I realized, even though I had let go of Emily and Daniel, deep inside, I had built a wall. I hadn't allowed anyone to cross it. A few days later, Claire, the coordinator of the program, asked me to stay for coffee. The cafe was quiet, just the hum of the espresso machine. She looked at me and smiled. "You speak calmly," she said, "but I feel like you're still holding something back." I sighed, nodded. "You're right. I can share my story, but when it comes to letting someone in, I'm still afraid." A long pause. She didn't rush to comfort me. Then she said softly, "Fear is normal, but remember this. Other people are not Emily. You get to choose how to trust again, on your own terms." Her words stayed with me, like a seed planted quietly. Weeks later, I decided to do something I had never done before. I signed up for a dance class, something Emily had once asked me to try, and I had always refused. On the first day, I stood awkwardly in a room lined with mirrors. The music started, my body stiff as wood, and then, out of nowhere, I laughed. For the first time, I felt myself step out of that shell of fear, just to enjoy it. In the months that followed, I kept going back to those group sessions. Helping others was also helping myself. Every story, every pair of eyes, like mirrors turned back on me, reminding me that I was still living. One evening, after the 10th session, I stepped out of the building. The sky was full of stars. I remembered Emily's words that day. "If one day you meet someone else, please don't let the past close your heart forever." That day, I only heard them. Today, I finally understood. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. No anger, no fear, just one clear truth. I was ready to step into the light, not because I forgot, but because I had learned to move forward. That night, I picked up the notebook I had written in by the river. On the very last page, I added one line. "This is no longer the story of someone left behind. This is the story of someone who walked out." I closed the notebook, smiled. Outside, the city lights were shining, and this time, I felt like I was shining with them. One spring morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was a pale blue, sunlight slipping in through the blinds. I made myself a cup of coffee, stepped out onto the balcony, and sat there watching the city slowly wake up. It's been a year and a half since that night at the gallery. If someone had told me back then that I would be sitting here like this, so at peace, I wouldn't have believed them. Because there are wounds that when they happen, you think you'll never climb out of. I can't even remember when I stopped counting the hard days. Maybe it was when I realized life doesn't wait for you to stand still. The day I chose to step into the gym, to walk by the river, to leave that old house behind, was the day I started finding my way back to myself. People often ask, is forgiveness the most important thing? I always answer, forgiveness is only part of it. What matters more is accepting that the past happened, and nothing can change it. Once you accept that, it stops dragging you backward. I've been through more than I ever thought I could take. I lost the person I trusted the most. But because of that, I found a different version of myself. More patient, more deliberate, more willing to listen. Sometimes I think about those men in the circle of chairs at the support group, each carrying a story, each carrying a wound. Some have left, some are still there, and I realize life is like that circle. In the end, we all find a place where someone understands what we've been through. Now and then, on a quiet afternoon, I still go back to that same riverbank. I sit on the same stone steps, watch the water flow. But now, it's not to forget. It's to remind myself how far I've come. Since the first time I sat there, I've learned to enjoy small things again. A song on the radio, a cup of coffee on a Sunday morning, a walk home at night, looking up and seeing the whole sky full of stars. Little things. But for me, they're proof that I'm no longer stuck in the dark. I don't know who the future will bring into my life. But if that day comes, this time, I won't let an old wall stop me from trying again. Not because I believe I'll never be hurt, but because I've learned to trust myself, that no matter what happens, I'll stand back up. One evening, after a dance class, I stepped out into the street. The night was quiet. Yellow lights stretched across a sidewalk, still wet with dew. I stopped, took a deep breath, and without thinking, I smiled. In that moment, I could feel it. For the first time in years, I was no longer walking in the dark. I was stepping into the light. If someone asked me what the biggest lesson in all this was, I would say, don't be afraid of being left behind. What's far worse is leaving yourself behind in your own life. That night, I opened the same notebook I'd started at the river. On a new page, I wrote, I'm still here, and I'm going to keep going. I closed the notebook, set the pen aside. Outside, the city lights were glowing. And this time, I didn't just see the light. I knew I was finally walking toward it.